Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Lay It on the Table, the Southern board gaming podcast that puts the accent on Southern. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mahaffey, back after a long hiatus. Well, we took a week off, and of course, with me is my co-host James Eaglehart. Hi, James.
Well,
how you
Joe,
doing?
how's life been treating you?
Well, I'm having one of those technical issue days, so hopefully this beeping that I keep hearing is not going to bleed through into our conversation today. I hope not. It never fails. The day we go to record, and then something fun always happens from a technical perspective. But anyway, other than that, I'm doing pretty good. But yeah, I couldn't be here a couple of weeks ago. I got scaled Agile training, which is about as actually it was pretty exciting. Scaled Agile is a thing I use for work. It's all about organizing things in a constructive way to get things done more efficiently from a development standpoint. And I'm sure that in addition to software, I'm positive a number of board games probably get assembled in an agile manner, or at least that's my dream. So sorry we had to take that week off, but it was exciting. A great instructor, great content. I was very pleased.
I'm happy for you. It's been, I guess, let's see. My parents came into town from Cambodia, so they're hanging out now. Still recovering from jet lag, but otherwise doing pretty well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they retired to Cambodia.
Now, did they have... They retired to Cambodia. I guess the dollar goes a little further there.
Yeah.
So they're closer to where the board games are manufactured. How come they're not your source?
You think so? But no, they've got their whole other life there doing their thing. So yeah,
got it. Well, I'm glad they made it here safely, and glad they get to spend some time with you and the babies.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot of hours right in a row there. Yeah.
But it's amazing that we live in a day and age that we can
30 hours gets you all the way across the globe as opposed to 50 miles down the road. So yeah.
There you go.
So what have you gotten anything to the table recently? Because I've just been, it's all been all quacks all the time at my house. So
well, speaking of 30 hours, no, all kidding aside. No, we've been playing a couple games. Yeah, we finally got Arc Nova onto the table. And I got to tell you, so for me, the learning curve was a little steeper than I anticipated. Thank goodness for YouTube. We found a couple of good YouTube videos that kind of made it simple to follow. And so we were able to kind of use that as a rubric yesterday, where we kind of used the play along to kind of kick us into gear. And now it's like, oh my gosh, it's like there's that epiphanal moment where all of a sudden, okay, I get it. And there was so much of it that I got, but there were certain things that I was just, there were these little nitpicky nuance things. It's kind of like the only other game I can think of that sort of intimidated me a little bit before I got at the table and then kind of had that epiphany moment was also Tapestry. I remember looking at Tapestry and all the pieces and all the components and all the multi-dimensional ways that you can play the game. And my brain is like, okay, I got to figure out the pattern, And so it took us a click to do it. And it also took us the time to sit down. It's a monster game to set up on the table. And I finally, the Ship Shaper game, he's a guy out in Oregon that makes inserts for games, Ship Shaper games. No, not sponsored, of course. He came out with an insert for it, which is helpful because it gets you organized. It was super easy to put together. It took me like a half an hour. But put all the components where they needed to go. So now it's like quicker on the table, quicker out of the chute. That also helps for us because they'll be like, hey, you want to play a game? Yeah. Want to play Arc Nova?
I was going to say,
it'll take an half hour to set up.
It takes an hour and a half to play
something else. So that's
set up and take down. Yeah.
Well, I would say it's more than an hour and a half to play because we started yesterday. Now, the first round I don't really count because we were kind of following along. And so that was like an hour to get to the first break and we'll pick up faster.
Right on.
We got through a couple of breaks yesterday and decided we hadn't met the win condition yet. So we're just going to play again today. Pick it up. So I like that because it allows us to play a game in the context of the other aspects
Right.
of our lives. In other words, we can sit down for an hour or two, play to a stopping point. We don't have to get to completion. We just kind of put a note on
Yep.
whose turn it is next, and we can walk away from the table and come back to it. I like that aspect of it. I like that it's a pretty game. It's got the zoo motif, and there's a lot of component moves to it, whether it's worker placement or card
Yeah.
building or deck building, um, those kinds of things. And there's also, certain win conditions you can go for in terms of conservation, as well as building. So it's very well thought out. It's very
Hmm.
complete, if you will, and it covers all the bases. If you like zoos, not in a Tiger King kind of way, but if you like zoos, and you like conservation, and you like research, and you like international cooperation, I mean, there's just something for everybody in this
Except
game. So I'm
spaceships
very
and
excited
orcs,
by it.
but yeah.
But so it's interesting because you know when we watch the playthrough, and the YouTubers are probably very well known to our audience. I'll have to look them up while
Yeah.
we're having this conversation. But she keeps the young lady in the video teaching the game keeps talking about, well, if you do this, it's going to cost you 10 money. If you do this, it's going to cost you 5 money. And I was thinking to myself, wow, number one, I like the fact that she's calling it money as
Hmm.
opposed to dollars, because she's aware that this is an international hobby, and that some people use euros and some people use
Hmm.
pesos, and other types of currency. So I liked that. And then it kind of got me thinking about Arc Nova as a Euro game that is not about because let me actually, I should probably take a step back. One of the outcomes of this game is you can win with negative
Wow.
points because of the way that
Right.
it's structured. So I might have negative 5 points, and my wife could have negative 10 points, and
Oof.
therefore I win. But it also kind of got me thinking about, like Isle of Cats, in the sense that here are these two Euro games where you can have negative score but still potentially win the game. And I thought, I wonder if that is a component of Euro
Hmm.
games, as opposed to an American centric game, because Americans is like,
Right.
"Oh, I want to be first and I want to be second," that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that in more games than I
So,
do,
two
perhaps?
thoughts. One is I also always call it money because a lot of games have a different unit of currency. It's electrum or electro in like a power grid, and so this or that. But we always just say, okay, it's going to be 5 money, 2 money, whatever, and that way you don't have to remember what the actual name of the currency, which is sometimes quite, I mean, either thematic and perhaps thematic to the point of being incredibly goofy. So that's one thought. The other is that, yeah, I mean, I think of people like Stefan Feld and Knizia, who, Knizia is the your best worst score, right, or worst best score, something like this, where the thing that you have the least in is the only one that scores, right? So starting with something like Ingenious,
Mm-hmm.
where the thing that's farthest behind is the one that you count, and then Stefan Feld, thinking about like Notre Dame and Notre Dame and other games like this, where you can you can keep losing points, or you can think you're doing well, and then you just haven't kept up with the rat track, or you haven't fed your Uwe Rosenberg, you haven't fed your family in Agricola, and so yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I think of the American style game where it's really there's a lot more sort of head to head right at each other, and there's less allowance of getting you into negative points. I'm sure someone who had listened to this at some point would say, "Oh, but that's my first sort of quick hot
Yeah,
take on the
100%.
topic."
Well, and like I said, it was just a thought that I had yesterday as we were playing the game, because there is another component of Arc Nova that I really like, is that there is an element where you can be mean
Hmm.
to each other. And it's easier to be mean in a 3 or 4 player game, but when you're playing a 2 player game, it's kind of like, well,
Yeah.
I have no choice, but if I'm going to be mean, I have to be mean to you, etc. And so they actually recommend, because of the way that the solo variant is, if you have that card, you can just choose to do the
Ah.
solo variant aspect on the card, which eliminates that, which I thought, wow, and it was something that was called out by the playthrough. And I thought that was really ingenious, because it kind of creates, number one, it makes the game easier to learn without having this level of complexity that you can then
Yep.
later add back in. But at the same time, I like the fact that it kind of has that versatility that if that's not your style of gameplay,
That's
it doesn't
fantastic. That
have to
kind of
be.
reminds me, in a slightly different way, of Wingspan. Trying to play Wingspan, base Wingspan 2 player, and because you get stuck with the bird feeder not cycling a lot, or the bird cards.
Right.
And someone had this idea, like, well, take the Automa cards and start playing them as a sort of ghost player to move some of these other things around. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's a pretty simple fix.
Well, there is a video on YouTube that says about Arc Nova, this is not the next Wingspan. And I have to agree with that, because it's not nearly as, I wouldn't exactly call Wingspan a gateway game, but I would say that Wingspan is a game you can play the minute you
Right.
step in the
Yeah.
gateway. Because it's very highly, although I actually treat Wingspan as a gateway game, because I teach a lot of people the game, because I think it's easy to teach. But yeah, it's Arc Nova. But it's interesting because Jamie Stegmeyer has done a video on Arc Nova about why it's one of his favorite game mechanics, and I like him because he's always happy to talk about games that are not his games, and I like it when, evidently Capstone Games, who is the publisher of Arc Nova, does the publishing for Wingspan in Europe. So they have a relationship, and there's just this whole, it's I love to see the camaraderie and the support and the, all of that kind of thing. It's a very different space than, say, the video game industry. We're like, oh, Elden Ring comes out and sucks up all the air out of the room. Where is Halo going to fit? Well, Halo's going to fit with people that like Halo.
And it is an industry that is sort of friendly competition. I was in publishing for many years, and that was another one, particularly academic publishing, that also had friendly competition, where I would send projects to other publishers saying, hey, this one isn't quite for us, but I think it would fit super well with y'all. And I've heard stories over the years from publishers and designers saying that about the gaming industry as well. Board games industry, yeah. The gaming industry, I always have to be careful, right? Because in the broader world, the gaming industry is, casinos, gambling. That's what gaming is. And
yeah.
I have to always remind myself, my thinking about the word gaming is very different from lots of other people. Like, ooh, there's a gaming place?
Fair.
Oh, no.
Don't you walk in with your board game and you're like, oh.
I was hoping for a game cafe. No. All right.
So that's what's on our table. And I suspect that this is going to be on the table for a while, because I think it was one of those, like, okay, we're going to get into this, and it's going to get deep. However, I will tell you this. I have a life event coming up. So on Wednesday of this week, I will have been married, not 1, not 2, but 31 years.
All right, man. Wow.
And so, as is typical here lately, I have a stockpile of things that have come in that will be the anniversary present. So maybe we'll talk about that the next time we're together. And we will have probably moved on for a couple of games, but there are some surprises in there.
Yeah, because I'm also having a life event coming up, and I will be
Tell us about
not
that.
once, not twice, but 3 times married. So there we go.
I didn't realize it was 3. I knew it was going to be. I thought it was going to be 2. Wow.
Third go round. So that's what I'm thinking.
Third time's a charm.
That's where my money is. I have a couple of other friends who are like, yep, the third one, that's the one I've been married to for 20 years now. So going for.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, that's great. Congratulations. And it was funny because, we were talking about this the other day, and for some reason I had it in my brain that y'all had already done the ceremony, but I guess it hadn't been the case.
We have the kid already, so
that's awesome.
So that's doing background.
I get that. No, I understood that. I remember the ring. I remember the Facebooks and all that stuff. So that's awesome. Congratulations. And you're going to a non-disclosed location
somewhere in the beaches of South Carolina.
Pedro, south of the border in South Carolina, which is up. So you're not. Yeah. Yeah, no surprise pulling into that parking lot saying we're
Yeah.
here. Just kidding. So that's great. Yeah, so I know that that'll probably impact our recording schedule coming up, but that just means we might take an extra week
Yeah.
or so off. I did have another game that we've had on the table, but I know we want to talk about the holiday of last week or the week before, and I'm going to put that in context there. So why don't we turn it over to you to kind of introduce that
So
segment.
it was Father's Day, and because I am who I am, and I'm on this podcast and some other one that has tabletop games. So Laura and my daughter Sky got together to find fancy dice for me. So I was delighted. Big metal chunky dice. So that was a fun Father's Day gift, and then a little meeple on a keychain. So fun little things to have. And it's I mean, and one of the things that's been great to get. I mean, one, it's on brand for me, right? It's like, oh, it's Father's Day. We're gonna get James. We're gonna get game related stuff. So it's always nice. But it's also fun because I was thinking about, I got into tabletop games before Sky was born, and so she's come up her entire life, playing games from the very beginning, and so it's one of her identities that she kind of takes into the world with friends and just everywhere. Like, I'm a gamer kid, and even she started playing D&D with us. And so junior high kids are starting to find out that there's this whole D&D thing. They watch a lot of YouTube, and they watch a lot of YouTube, TikTok as well, but YouTube. And so they come to her and are saying, Sky, so you play D&D? Yes. So she gets to have this, I don't know, it's a terribly geeky mantle to put on this child for her to, wear around her shoulders. But they come to her as a sort of wise figure of knowing all of the game stuff. And I think it's a I don't know. We'll see how that identity either shifts, evolves. Right now, she's really reveling in it. And at the same time, we're like, okay, you're here for the week. Let's sit down and play some games. And she'll be like, do I have to play with you, Dad? So we're also at that age. So there's a interesting space there.
Well, and it's, first of all, I got to say I'm very jealous because my junior high experience was very different. If somebody came up to you and said, "You play D&D,"
yeah, that was more like an excuse to
as we previously talked
to be ostracized.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's funny.
And I'm sure it's a bunch of little geeky sort of theater and band kids who are asking her this kind of advice. It's not like it's cheerleaders and basketball players who are wandering over to ask for that.
Although there are a number of athletes that are big into D&D. I love the fact that like a Joe Manganiello plays D&D and is very demonstrative about it, because I think it makes it creates a table where people from different skill sets and experiences can come together and still play, which I love. So I thought that was I know he's got a game that he does in his home. He's got I don't know if you've ever seen the video that he's got this, he and his wife, who's the woman from Modern Family, Sofia Vergara, I think is her name. They have this house in LA where they have this room that has like a wine cellar, and he turned it into a D&D room where he's got a beholder head on the wall, and he's got all these gothic chairs and stuff, and it is his fortress of solitude. Anyway, more so than what I sure. It's what I aspire to.
I think we all do, right?
Yes. So cool. And so your Father's Day was good. Sky was in town for part of it,
and she was back with her mom's for the day itself,
right?
But she had schemed with Laura to pick out some things and to put together this very geeky kind of stuff. And and it's funny when people say, "Well, oh my God, how do you have so many games?" Like, well, I didn't buy all of them. Once you have it on a as part of the again, we're thinking about James. What can we do? There's going to be a wish list somewhere, and it's probably going to be as long as your arm. And there they are, games. We'll just do that. So That's an annual influx, a couple of times a year. So, and that's how you end up.
Well, it's funny. It's funny how both of our families kind of think alike. But my wife took a different tack on it though, because there was this bag that was out in our living room for weeks that said "Game On" it, and she's had all the tissue in it. And I said, "What's that?" And she goes, "It's Father's Day gift. Don't look in there." Got it. So Father's Day rolls around. She goes, "Here's your gift." And I get it, and I open it up and I pull it out, and she gave me this.
Okay. Is that a book of family games to
It's
play?
a book.
Yeah.
It's a book. And so, yeah, so her thought was if we ever got into it, she thought about the podcast
Okay.
when she found this book, because she's like, if we ever got into a conversation about, certain topics, that it would have like a reference
Nice.
material for us and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's a sweet idea. It's the games that are kind of not so much those things that we would find in the game store, but there are things in here that probably inspired a lot of what's in the game store. And there's like rules for Go, and there's rules for chess and checkers and stuff. I should have said that as Monopoly, 21, checkers, and chess, but I didn't.
Well, and I've got a couple of books like that. I have here the games we played, which is about Victorian era games, and they call it the golden age of board and table games. And I thought, well, you are way, way, way off on that, but they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. That's fine. So anyway, so that was that. Did you play any special games that day?
Again, quacks. Yeah, all quacks.
Quacks.
Because it's easy enough. We leave it out on the table and put Emerson to sleep for his afternoon nap, and we've got we can knock out a game of quacks in 20 minutes and then go to doing dinner prep or whatever else. But it's sit down, have a beer, dip into quacks. It doesn't take a lot of thinking. And I was thinking about Arc Nova as you were talking about it, and thinking about the ways that there's kind of a game literacy that happens. So when I pull out a game that might be looking like Arc Nova, that has a lot of pieces, even like Quacks, Laura just starts to go, "Whoa, is this going to be? I don't know how I feel about all these pieces." And then we start playing it, and she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is, now that you explain it, it makes more sense." But also thinking about just the kind of skills that we develop, like when I tried to teach a deck building game to friends the first time, just the whole idea of a deck building game kind of blows their mind. When you're talking about worker placement games, the same thing. It's just like, what am I doing? I can't just, I'm going to do this, but you can't. You have to put your little meeple there. You have to pick your meeple up depending on which game it is. And the ways that once you play a lot of these games over a long period of time, when someone starts saying, okay, so this game has this, and this mechanism, and they're kind of tied together in this way, I go, all right. So, talk me through the details, but it doesn't take me long to just kind of jump in, because I see what the game is doing and how those mechanisms, then the question is how those mechanisms interact and interlock. And so I think about gaming literacy a lot. And in terms of how people like progress through either becoming a hobby gamer or not.
That's a really good point, though, because it also struck me yesterday as we were trying to sort through it all, that it had been a while since we'd played a more complex game, that we've been sort of gravitating to something a bit more simple. So like, what can we get on the table fast and play? That's sort of been our life here lately. And it's, some of the games that we've played recently, Canopy, which I'm going to talk about in the Father's Day segment, and Meadow. They're not, although I'd say Meadow's not necessarily a simplistic game, but it's not as much thinking as, say, a Tapestry or even we were talking about the Lost Ruins of Arnak. I think the last game that kind of gave me that kind of pause was the Lost Ruins game, but the rule book was a lot easier to unpack and get through the game. And I think that's one thing that Arc Nova initially suffered from. And I think they've thought about it, because they've published a PDF now. If you go to the Capstone Game website, there's a PDF that basically says, for your first round, follow this rubric, and they give you for each player the cards you should have in your
Interesting.
hand, the conservation projects you should put on the board, and kind of what to get you to the first break. And I think it was useful. That's kind of what we used yesterday, because it's that idea of muscle memory of how do you get to the first routine and kind of see how things work. Because once I kind of got okay, I get it now, we were off to the races. And I think that when you stay away from games like that for a while, it's easy to kind of lose that familiarity, because I'm really good at looking at the card and going, oh, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do.
It tells you pretty easily. Well, and I think this is interesting because going back to Wingspan yet again, the first printing didn't have anything, and people were like, oh, I love birds. How the hell do I play a game like this? And then Stonemaier started doing those quick start sets, right? The quick start pack, just to say, here's, like you were saying, sort of get your muscles moving in the right direction, find out that the muscle, building that memory. And once you get the hang of it, okay, I see, take the training wheels off and away you go.
Well, I think I told you when we went on a trip with my in-laws, we took a bunch of board games with us, which I've got a case that I could very specifically put board games in and check the case. I've never been so nervous waiting for a bag to come out of.
I can replace clothes, but these board games.
I mean, this was like an ATA approved case. Nothing was going to happen on the inside. It just had to get there. Like people's golf clubs were coming out. I'm like, where's my games? Where's my games? Anyways, but we taught them, and they were 80 years old at the time and never been played a board game like that before. And we just got them right into the mode. So yeah, anyway. Yeah. So, my Father's Day, we put Canopy on the table. We had played Meadow for a few days prior to that, just because it's, again, easy, accessible, fun game. But our daughter was willing to play a game with us. We have our youngest daughter's at home with us right now. She just graduated college. She's kind of working on what's next. And so she was home. She said, I will play a game with you. And we were like, the heavens opened up. You heard the choir going, oh, she's going to play a game. So she sat down and we played Canopy, and it was great. I came in first. She came in second. My wife lost. So that was the silver lining for my daughter, was that
did she have a good time? Did she enjoy the game?
Yeah, it was a great. I don't know if you've played Canopy or seen it. So I had backed it on Kickstarter, and it showed up, and it's a card building tableau kind of game. You go through. You have 3 seasons. And then you're kind of building your forest, and so you get a tree trunk, and then you get another tree trunk, and you can stack them or you can keep them separate. And so you're trying to build your forest canopy. You're collecting plants and you're collecting animals, and they give you certain powers, and they can, at the end of each season, you get rid of your plants, but you keep your animals. You score your animals at the end of the game. You score your plants at the end of the season. And then in addition to plants and animals, there's sun and rain, and they either work for you or against you, depending upon how many you have. And then occasionally you run into fire, disease, blight, or drought, and lightning. And those are some things that you can do, some instant kind of things that either help you or hurt you, depending upon how you do it. So it's a very nice balanced game in that sense. And it teaches you something. It's ecologically minded. You're thinking through, the animals and stuff. It's a nice little game, and
it looks super pretty.
It's balanced in the sense. Yeah, it's balanced in the sense that at the end of each round there is a tallest tree award. So if you're behind on points from the first round, you can make it up in the second round, and then at the end of the game there's the largest forest 10-point award. And what we've noticed is that can be the real equalizer. So if I do really well all 3 seasons, but she gets the largest forest, our game scores can be really, really close.
And you don't want to let the other person, unless you're scoring really well, you definitely don't want the other person to have the largest forest. So there's pressure to keep those forests very quick,
And you can
close rather.
yeah, and you can see what because the way it works is you get a trunk, you put the trunk on the table, or you can stack the trunks for a taller tree. So you can either have 2 trees or
Right.
one tall tree. But the minute you get a canopy card, if you have a trunk, you have to place it.
Okay.
Or if you don't have a trunk and you get a canopy card,
Ooh.
you got to throw it away. And my
Yeah,
wife's
no
like,
doubt.
that hurts my heart. So, but it's a fun game. It's super easy to learn. It's highly accessible. It's up to 4 players, but it also plays very, very well. It's optimized for 2-player, and then you can add 3 and 4. There's some variant ways to play it. We actually played the 3-player game with the same rules as a 2-player game, only because it seemed to me it'd be a lot simpler to do it that way, because the way the rules look for a 3-player game, it looked a lot like in between 2 castles. And when you're trying to play that as a 2-player game and you have to have the phantom player and all, it was just, we just like, you know what? We want the daughter to play. Well, let's not keep it
So has
complicated.
she
Let's
played
keep
a
it
lot with
simple.
y'all in the past, or is this kind of a new thing?
She's played Isle of Cats with us. She likes Isle of Cats. She's played Wingspan with us. She likes Wingspan. She's watched us play Genotype. We've tried to get her to play Genotype because she was a biology major. And she watched us play. She looked through the materials, and what she really liked about Genotype is they give you a book in that game that you can tell that they got the science right behind what they're teaching in the game. And somebody who studied biology, she's like, this is almost like right out of the stuff I'm learning in my classes. This is great. This is phenomenal. You know, this is one of those. This is the same publisher that gives us, Periodic and some other science-minded games. And it's a great game too. That game, Genotype, reminds me a lot of like viticulture in the way that you play it, worker placement, and all the things that are going on, the cards and how that plays out. It's a really nice game as well. But I'm trying to think. We played. She likes Alley Cats and all that. But we've also played a lot of Canopy
with her, or just you and Dale.
Not Canopy. I said Canopy. I meant Cascadia.
Right. Still natural, yeah.
Been playing a lot of Cascadia this week, yeah, because that was sort of our palate cleanser between Canopy and Arc Nova, was to pull that out, and just again the simplicity of it. Leave it set up, easy to do.
You know, that's an easy. Yeah, but it's got a lot of good thinkiness to it. There's lots of different puzzles to solve when you're trying to play Cascadia.
I'm a big salmon fan, so I'm always trying to build the salmon.
That is a good strategy.
Yep. So, but it's funny, when we've played that game, we actually had one score where we both had 91s, and we had different strategies to get there. And we've had some other games where it's just like we've been off of each other by a point. It's that's fun, because we kind of have the game.
Yeah, I like the games where you end up within just a few points. Particularly, I mean, I think we're both talking about playing a lot of games with our partners, and it just doesn't feel good to crush the other one like a bug. If I'm winning something like Cascadia by 20 or 30 points, it just doesn't feel good.
31 years of marriage, I don't have a problem with it. I'm kidding.
Dale doesn't listen, does she?
Yeah, she doesn't listen to the podcast.
But but it is funny. It is one of those things, though. Like that's, and I imagine there are people out there who feel okay doing that or feel good about that, but I just can't imagine. I can't imagine being in that kind of headspace. And I wonder if there are people. Maybe there are others who are just like, no, none of us really have that kind of feeling either.
Yeah, it's funny. I know a couple of my favorite local game store that are, I wouldn't say that they're that way, but they're very much sticklers for the rules. And, I will call them, one of them in particular is oftentimes the rules lawyer. But I mean that in a very positive way, because this person will learn the rules and is very good at teaching because they understand the
t-shirt
rules.
Says,
that's
I read the rules so you don't have to. I learn the rules so you don't have to. Yeah,
exactly. So, Um, and they're and this couple is very similar to you in the sense that they have their board game geek app, and they log who did they play with, what did they play,
Yeah.
what was the score, um I'm not that disciplined. I should be. um I'm really not. I mean, I know I play a lot
Yep.
of games. I don't know if I need the data. I
I
don't know if
do
I
I
need the
do some
data to
very
tell me
basic
that I
data
do.
keeping just because it is kind of fun to say I have all of these games, which ones actually, get to the table and how many times and
Yeah.
what is at the end of the year? Do I have five dimes, quarters, and dollars at the end? And right now there's not a lot of games I get to the table over 100 times, but Quacks is certainly climbing the list. Um, but it's also,
Yeah.
we like to say that we run a friendly table. If there's a question about the rules, you're like, could it go this way or this way? It's like, why don't we do the one that's just, best for you? Or it's not quite, oh, wait, they say, oh, wait, I don't want to change my turn. I just, I see that I should have done something else. If other people haven't taken a turn, it's like, yeah, go ahead, change it. It's fine. We'll get it all figured out.
Well, that's the way we are, particularly with Arc. Like, I'm going to go back to Arc Nova again as the example, is that we've already established a house rule because there was
Okay.
ambiguity. So there's
Right.
this reputation track, and when you get to 2, you have 3 choices. You can either take a zoo piece, you can get 5 money, or you can get another worker. You get to choose one of the 3s, and I'm like, well, if you don't land on 2 but you pass
Ah,
2, do you still get that? So we said, you know what? And I scoured the rule book. There was ambiguity about it. So I said, regardless of what the rules are, house rules are, when you pass that threshold, that's what you
yeah.
get. You get to choose, because otherwise I would think it's sort of unbalanced, because there's not a way to ensure that you land on 2 and
Right.
5 and 10, because you may go past them. So I thought, well, let's balance the
Yeah.
game out a little bit that way. And that's the thing, when there's ambiguity in the rules, which a lot of games, they try to accommodate
Right.
everything in the
Well,
playtesting,
and that sounds
but
like a
sometimes.
just an oversight for the editing of the rule book.
Yes, yes. And that's the other thing too, is that they give you a lot of content, but I would like to see, this is what your game board should look
Yep.
like, and this is what the association board
Oh,
should
do they
look
not have
like.
that?
And well, they do, but there's still room for, they're so busy explaining how the cards impact your boards that they overlook, unless I just haven't seen it. And it's distinctly possible, because I'm sitting there with the book flipping through it. And that's, one of the things that my wife and I have lamented on, is the fact that we have,
Oh
50
yes.
plus year old eyes, and it's not like they make these games large print. And so my wife actually keeps a magnifying glass with a light at her side at the game table. So when she looks at a card, she can pop it right up and
I was
zero
going to say
right.
this
And
is
then,
this
I
is
do
my
the same thing with
magnifying
the
glass
phone.
with light in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because this, like in this particular game, each of the sponsor cards have a number on it, and then they give you a glossary to look up the number to get more details. And you're like, but the numbers are like
There you
on
go.
the head of a pin. So yeah, so we're
Yes,
like,
I had a friend of mine for
um,
in my game group for many years who would just keep. And I was like, dude, just get the glasses. He's like, no, no, I can do this. I'm like, you clearly cannot do this. Yeah. Probably now uses a selfie stick with a bit of putty on the end. Yeah,
there you go, there you go. So yeah, so that was our
nice.
Father's Day excursion
And
into
again, I mean, is
gaming.
it? I'm curious. Do you think your daughter is going to be more interested in games as she continues to hang out with you now that this is kind of a something that you and Dale do, or is she kind of drifting in and out saying,
I think it will be more of
okay,
the drift. I think that
sure,
she's got her own hobbies right now. She just got her yoga certification. She spent her time in college
sure.
focused on college, and it's really for the first time in her life she's been able to kind of go, phew, and have some fun.
Right on.
And so she is reconnecting with some friends in a way that I think is very healthy, which I think could ultimately lead back to gaming because, she's got some friends that I think if I could get them together and maybe do a
Yeah,
D&D one shot or bring in a board game, I think that would be the gateway. I think that she would be much more amenable to it if it was within her peer group than
yeah,
just with mom and
that
dad,
makes sense.
which, I'm down with.
Sure.
I'm down with because, it's for me, I love it when people discover the game, gaming, whatever it is. And, um, they don't have to play it with me to
And I
enjoy
think
it,
that's another important point
and
because it's it's one thing to be sort of an ambassador or even proselytize for games. A lot of people just have no idea that there are so many amazing games out there. Um, and so it's interesting to see, like, I have to measure how much I'm going to like suggest and draw people in because it's I don't know. I think an interesting tension around games just because they're not seen as productive or as like something that a healthy adult does. You should be out doing stuff. I don't know what. And for me, it feels like games are part of what we do as humans to stay healthy and happy. And we've done this for millennia.
mhm.
And we now have excellent games and a lot of different options and a lot of different ways to think about. Do you want to play this kind of game or that kind of game or so many different ways to go. But I also hesitate to go full on evangelical, as it were, and say, you must, let me evangelize to you. And finding that kind of balanced sweet spot of, hey, this is available if you'd like to try this. This is fun stuff. And not, I mean, and this is a balance that I try to do with my first year writing class too, that's themed around tabletop games, is to say, hey, we're going to read about them and I expect you to play things, but I'm not expecting to necessarily build a lifelong gamer who says mechanisms and the money of the game kind of, says meeple every third word.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I actually have found board gaming
Ah,
helps my career.
say more.
And this is what I mean by that. So I mean I'm in an industry that generally puts people to work
Hmm.
in projects kind of stuff. And so I'm helping people with their career. And I see a lot of similarities between engine building strategies
Sure.
and what I do for clients. In other words, if I have two or three projects going on at a client that's sort of like small, medium, and large, or beginner,
Hmm.
intermediate, advanced, I can build an engine where I'm onboarding people coming out of college with base skills and let them do something on the beginner project, and then they get their skills, and then they're ready to earn more money and do more work, but it's not available in that group, and so we can promote them to the next group and then to the next group. And when you have a client like that, and I've been blessed enough in some instances to have that on a couple of occasions where I've been able to use the engine metaphor as a
Hmm.
value add. And it wasn't until I started board gaming that I saw the logic in explaining it that way to the client and have the client go, "Hey, that makes a ton of sense because I'm kind of home before I'm getting these people under a contract, but I'm moving them through different skill sets and advancing their career. And if I don't have a place for them, they've come here and they've earned something that they
Right.
can take elsewhere, or I have somebody ready to come into my organization and they're ready to be a part of my team, and they've gone through the journeyman, if you will, or journeywoman, if you
Sure.
will, journey person. Okay, to get there, and I think that I now the logic
Sure.
of doing that was always there. I think gaming has given me a way to think about it differently and explain it differently and talk about it so that you can
Hmm.
kind of visualize it. At the same time, I think there's a lot of strategic thinking that goes into games sometimes that is just a good way to kind of stretch our muscles a little bit, that when we have to get back to something that
Hmm.
might involve strategy, like I need to think about like here we are in June, we're halfway through the year. I'm already sitting down and thinking about, okay, what kind of adjustments do I need to make
Right.
for the second half of the year? And a lot of that thinking is inspired by the way I look at gaming. So I don't want to turn this into a business podcast, but I mean, that's, that's how gaming inform, maybe
Sure.
that's just how I take it. as a something that informs me
Yep.
in
And
that
I think
regard.
that makes sense to me, and it helps to. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to get Sky involved early in gaming, and we'll get Emerson involved early in these things, is because it does help you step through. Okay, so before I do this, I have to do that, and then once I've done that, then that'll allow me to do this other thing, and those kinds of chains, engine building in this case, that sort of thing. Yeah, and there's a lot of good stuff there. I'm always interested in the sort of slightly different version where we're thinking about how do I, how much proselytizing do I do about games to relative strangers, and how big a geek do I want to appear?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because so there's a family in our neighborhood.
Excellent.
Um, one of the parents is a
Oh
young
yeah,
adult author, and I'm happy to share that
sure,
with you
no worries.
privately at some point. See if you're aware of this individual. Um, this family has a child and one on the way, and the child is um, precocious at a early age. I'm not really sure of this individual's age, but every day now for the last couple of weeks, when my wife is out on her walk and they're out on their walk,
Oh,
he's asking
nice,
about games because somehow it came up, and now it's like, well, tell me how the game works, and da 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 da. And so there's
nice.
this innate curiosity about the complexity of games. So my sense is this individual is going
Mm-hmm.
to be a gamer at some point. And they were telling her about some games that they have and all of that, and so it was just kind of becoming interesting. And of course, my wife is like, "I'm happy to talk about games. I don't want it to, obviously the parents there, but doesn't want it to look
Yeah,
inappropriate, So I
yeah.
was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a sensitivity too, but it's the right sensitivity. I mean, it's when we walk into the game store, there's a lot of young people, and I think
Mm-hmm.
about Sky and um, their interaction with us, and trying to be just mindful of the it's always felt like it's always got to feel like a safe space, regardless of those
Yep.
who need to feel safety. And there's a lot of folks where that comes
Yes.
into play, I
Yes.
think.
And that's a
So
whole another big
anyway,
topic to
I digress. That's a whole
get
different
into.
topic. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll look at that at some other time. So, yeah. But as far as I think that's kind of all I got in the gaming world this week. How about
Yeah, I
you?
mean, I think the again getting ready to go to an unnamed beach somewhere in South Carolina in a couple of days, or a couple of days, couple of weeks, and trying to think of what do you take on a week's vacation to the beach. Sky will be with us. Emerson, Laura's family, several members of my family will be there, and so what's you don't want to take a whole, the back half of the car full of games. Although I could easily do that, but you do want to have room for. You want to have exact. There
U-Haul
you go.
trailer.
That's what I should do. Get a U-Haul trailer. Yep. But trying to think about things that are small boxes, but games that have some fun, appropriate themes, or just sort of fun end of the day, light playing kind of quick card game kind of thing. So I'm looking at this stack and consulting with Laura. When Sky gets here, we'll talk to them about what appeals. So that's kind of the thing that's on my mind. It's this fantastic space to be in where you're planning and knowing full well that we'll probably play one or two. We'll play the same game a couple of times, and that'll be yeah.
That's so
Okay,
here's something to think
lay it on
about.
me.
Um, I don't know where
Right.
you're going, but I know that when we go to Wilmington, and we've talked a little bit about the
Right.
game stores in Wilmington, I talk about Cape Fear Games, and what I like about Cape Fear is that they've got that thing called the sideboard, where you can go in and they have games you can just pull off the table. I wonder if there is, where you're going, a game store that
I
might
have
have
been
something similar.
when Sky was here a couple weeks ago. We were looking for such things. So there is at least a couple of gaming shops there, and there's also a games cafe. So we'll be trying to look for as
Mhm.
we'll go out and do some of the sightseeing around town, and the games cafe is kind of mostly on the way to one of the sites. So that'll be kind of fun,
Mhm.
and But and it is, I do love going to game stores when I travel, just because it's not usually in the tourist area. Game stores are for people who live there, and so it's awfully fun to have a hobby
Yep.
that you're like, okay, well, let's go take a couple hours, find this place because it's going to be in a neighborhood that won't see a lot of tourists, and so it'll look different, and the people will be acting different, and just looking forward to exploring that a little bit too. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I like that's one of my favorite things to do. I was in a game
Hmm.
castle in San Jose in a very warehousey part of town, so it was a very unusual spot. And then we found a game store in Old Town, Colorado, um,
Okay,
Colorado Springs. There was a
very
nice little game
cool.
store there that had it was a kind of a magic shop, but it had other games, and it was kind of nifty. But it was off the. It was not a
I went
touristy
to
kind of
a
thing.
game shop in
So
Minneapolis, which is less of a tourist destination than the other ones we've been talking about.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a pass
but
through
there
Delta.
was a game shop there. Oh, it was huge, fantastic.
Was
No,
it at
no,
Mall
his
of
own little
America?
freestanding place. Friend of mine who lived there was like, James, if you're here, we've got to go. You got to see this thing because it'll blow your mind. And he was right. It was astonishing.
Well, I got a number of friends in Minneapolis. I'll have
Yeah,
to ask them about it because there's one individual I know in particular that I think would probably know
probably.
that place very
It'd be
well.
hard to miss it. It was astonishing.
Yeah,
Not that I can remember the name of it, of course. Otherwise, I'd give him a shout out. But alas,
sure, sure. No, 100%. All
thank
right.
you.
Well, best of luck on
Yeah,
the nuptials coming
thank
up
you.
and the travel, and we'll be back probably in 30 days with another
I think that
installment if
sounds
I
about
think I
right.
have
Yeah.
the dates right. Yeah, because we've got the same issue
Yes.
with our D&D game. Um, but that is probably gives me some time to probably actually sit down and work on some of that D&D content and get it
Ah,
out onto the stream because it's just it's a barrier for
yeah.
me now and I got to get over that. So
Yeah.
anyway, cool, man. Well, I think for us wraps it up here for another episode of Lay It on the Table. As I like to say, I'm Joe Mahaffey. I am not
And
bored,
I'm
but I
James
am board
Englehart, and
gaming.
I hope all your
Hashtag.
tiebreakers break your way.
All right. We'll see you
Thanks.
next time. Thanks, everybody.